encourage you to take this home. And if you don't know much about a certain place or event or person, just come home and read through 1st and 2nd Samuel and just refresh yourself. This would be good sheet to hold on to. All right, everyone, take out the places and times sheet, the very first page. The very first one, we'll start over there with A. What's the chief city of Philistia? Gath, Bill said. Everybody get that one? You remember there were 5 main cities of Philistia, but Gath was the main one, and we'll talk about the king in a minute. David ruled over Judah from this particular city. Judah, remember, not all of Israel, but Judah. Hebron, good job. Good job. Home of Samuel. Go ahead, Denise. Ramah, yes. And when you're reading through the text, it always says that. Samuel went to Ramah. Samuel went home to Ramah. It's very repetitive. So once you read through it, you're like, oh yeah, that was Samuel's home, Ramah. And it says he was buried there as well. City that housed the ark for 20 years. It was in this particular city for 20 years. Yeah. No? Kiriath-Jearim, yes. Remember, after the Philistines had it, Israel got it, but it didn't go to the tabernacle. It stayed in Kiriath-Jearim for 20 years. And kind of along that story, these men died looking inside the ark. This was actually the first city that it went to when they looked in the ark, and they died. Then it went on to Kiriath-Jearim. But this particular city, men looked into it, and many died. Remember that city? Starts with a B. Anybody get it? Beth-Shemesh. Good job. Beth-Shemesh. So that was the story of how the Philistines had the ark, and then Israel eventually got it back. About how long did David rule in Hebron? Tommy answered that question. He ruled in Hebron first. About how long did he rule in Hebron, Karen? 7 years. About 6.5, 7 years. And how long did he rule all of Israel? United. How many? 40 years. But no, just all of Israel. If he's down here for 7, 33, yeah. How long was the ark in Philistia when the Philistines took it? 7 months. A city where Saul and his sons were hung on the wall when they died. Sounds a lot like that's James, yes. Yes, that's James. Was David happy about that? No. Not at all. David was never happy when God's anointed got hurt, or even his son got hurt. David had many opportunities to kill Saul. He didn't. This one was a little tricky. David rescued this town, and then he asked God, am I going to be safe here? Is Saul going to find me here? Are they going to betray me? God, yes. Very good, Cindy. Pilot. Yeah. So David rescues this town. Then he asks God, if I stay here, are these people going to betray me? And God said, yes, they're going to betray me. So him and his men left. So that was the city of Keilah. K-E-I-L-A-H. Philistine city plagued with tumors. Remember when they had the ark? Multiple both cities were plagued, but one in particular on this side here. Anybody? Cindy? Close. That was one of them, but that actually goes to another clue. Another city there. Starts with the E. Ekron, yes. That actually is correct, because Ashdod did get tumors as well, so that is correct. But Ashdod goes to another clue as well. But that one, Ekron. Where Jonathan and his armor bearer defeated the Philistines. So this was a really neat story because the Philistines had attacked. And what was Saul doing during this time? He was under a tree. He was under a tree doing nothing. And they were scared. They didn't know what to do. So David and his armor bearer, Jonathan and his armor bearer, climbed to that steep hill, very exposed, and attacked them head on. They defeated 20 right there, and it caused confusion among the Philistine camp. And then Saul, Jonathan and his armor bearer, going headstrong into the Philistine camp. That tells you a little bit about Jonathan and his armor bearer. What kind of warriors they were, and how brave they were, and how much they believed in God, that God would protect them. Do you remember where that was that he did that? Michmash, yes. Mm-hmm. That was an amazing story of bravery and courage and faith on Jonathan's part and his armor bearer. And what's the hometown of Saul? Gibeah. Mm-hmm. Again, just if you read through the text, constantly talking about Saul going back to his hometown, Gibeah. Where was David's hometown? Bethlehem. Mm-hmm. And Samuel was Ramah. And here's the one you were talking about earlier, Cindy. The temple of Dagon was here. Ashdod. Now they also got tumors. But you remember where they put the ark when they captured it? They put it in the temple of Dagon in Ashdod. And they put it in there next to the statue of Dagon. And what happened when they went in the next day? It had fallen over. So they picked it back up. And then they went in the next day, and what happened to it? Yeah, this time God says, you ain't picking it back up this time. This time it fell over, hands busted off, the neck, the head busted off. And then at that point, they're like, we've got to get this ark out of here. Will? Keilah, yes. Keilah. That was I. Mm-hmm. Where David rescued this town, and they betrayed him, or they would have betrayed him if he had stayed. So how did everybody do? Anyone get 100? I know a couple like Beth-Shemesh, Beth-Shan, they did a little bit of anything. Ashdod, Ekron, I give you credit for those because they both had tumors. All right, turn over to the people. Who searched for his father's donkeys? Saul. This is the one I said, well, it's not going to be obvious with Saul unless you know the story. His father sent him on a journey to find their donkeys. Who was Saul's commander of his military? Anybody raise their hand? Abner. What do you guys think of Abner? Was he a good guy, bad guy? I really liked Abner. I really liked it. I think he had some integrity. The story of when Asahel was chasing him, he didn't want to kill Asahel. Do you remember the three brothers? They're David's nephews. Joab, Asahel, and Abishai. These were three sons, the three nephews of his sister, sons of his sister. And Asahel, we're going to talk about that in a second, was chasing Abner. And Abner didn't want to kill him because he didn't want to make Joab mad at him. But Asahel continued to pursue him, but he had no choice but to kill Asahel. Yeah. It says he hit him with the butt end of the spear, but it went all the way through him.
I just wonder if he didn't really intend for that to happen.
Yeah.
You know,
He said he didn't hit him with the spear, and hit him with the butt.
right. I've always wondered about that, whether that was kind of a blow to take him out.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's how hell was going that fast. Here's a little story. My son Alex, when he was younger, 12, was running through the woods, dark woods, and he ran into a branch, and it was the thick branch, a butt end, and it went all the way through his leg. Come out the back. And we ended up having surgery to get that removed.
That's over his presence.
But that's what speed and even a blunt end will do. Yeah, or his cousin's house. But hit no arteries. There was almost no blood. So he sat in the hospital for a couple hours with a stick out of his leg. Every nurse and doctor in the hospital came by to see him. All right. Who were the sons of Samuel? Raise your hand. Cindy? Samuel's sons. This was Deanne? Joel and Abijah. Oh. Okay, here's the next question. Were they good guys? Were they good? No. They were evil. What were they doing? They were taking bribes. They were not judging the people well. Matter of fact, that's what the people said when they went to Samuel. You're getting old. You're going to be leaving us, and your two sons are corrupt. You can't leave us with them. So we need a king. That was their excuse to ask for a king. Was because his corrupt kids. He's not the only one who had corrupt children. Who wanted to poke the eyes out of the people of Jabesh Gilead? When Saul was first anointed king, this king came up to Jabesh Gilead and attacked it. And he told them, he said, if you guys don't surrender, I'm going to gouge out the right eye of every one of you. King was that? No. Starts with an N. Dan. Nahash. And if you remember, this is the king of Hammond. If you remember, later in 2 Samuel, it says that David and him were friends. This is the same guy. So he had a horrible relationship with Saul. Of course, Saul was the one that rescued them. When he was first anointed, Saul heard about this. He said, we can't have this. So he gathered all the Israelites, and they went up and they rescued the men of this town, David of Gilead. But later, I just found it interesting. It says Nahash was a friend of David. Interesting. At least they had an alliance. The priest of Nob who fed David showbread. When David was running from Saul, him and his men were hungry and starving. So he went to this priest and he actually told a little fib. He says, I'm on a secret mission from Saul, and I need you to feed us. And this priest said, I've got nothing but the showbread off the table. But this is the stuff we had just taken off, and we replaced it with fresh. So this is stuff normally the priest would eat. So he said, here, David, I've got this for you. What was that guy's name? What was that priest's name? Abinadab? No. Close. No. Ahimelech. Yes. Abiathar is the one that takes his place. Ahimelech was the priest that helped David. But he didn't just give David the showbread, he also gave David a weapon. What weapon did he give David? Yes, everyone called it a sword. It said there was none like it in all of the land. It was probably bigger than the rest. But I'm sure Goliath being their champion, they would have wanted him to have the best sword, the best shield. And then what happened to Ahimelech? Saul came up and killed him. Killed all the priests. was, trying to kill David, that he would go and kill all the priests at Nob. But one escaped. His son escaped Abiathar. Not even his son. So that was the priest of Nob, Hammond. Who was the father of David? Jesse. The ark was in this guy's house for 20 years. So remember, it was in, we know the city, Kiryat Jearim, but it was in someone's, specifically in someone's house. Someone already said, no, later. But this time for 20 years, it sat in this guy's house. Someone said it over here in regards to the priest. No. Abinadab. There's a lot of, I know they're very confusing. They're very confusing. Abinadab had 2 sons. What's the name of one of his sons? We all know that name. And so it sat in his house for 20 years. They cared for it. We're not sure, we're not told the details. But I'm guessing they got a little comfortable around it. For when David wanted to take it home to Jerusalem, he didn't carry it like they were supposed to. He put it on a cart. And who did he have leading the ark? Abinadab's 2 sons. Not the priest, not the high priest. Abinadab's 2 sons. And that was the problem, because when it started to tip over, Uzzah put his hand up. God killed him instantly. So that was Abinadab and his son Uzzah. Who was a harsh and an evil man? It was specifically mentioned about this guy. He had a wonderful wife. He was a horrible man. Nabal. That's a really neat story, because when David was running from Saul, him and his men were out in the wilderness, and they noticed all these sheep, and Nabal was the owner of these sheep, and they made sure that those sheep were protected, and no one came and stole those sheep. And they watched out for these shepherds and Nabal's stuff. And they went to Nabal and they asked him, hey, we've been doing all these things for you. We weren't asking for anything, but we're very hungry now. Can you please feed us? What was Nabal's response? Hey, who are you? You're just a runaway slave, runaway servant. I don't know you. So he was very rude to David. One, the old law is very specific about helping strangers, isn't it? And number 2, David is the anointed king. David didn't like Nabal's answer. What was David's response to Nabal? Yeah. Gerald does this, yeah. He said, guys, gather your swords, we're going out. If he's alive in the morning, then I'll, curse me. He went straight away to go kill Nabal, his entire crew. But someone stopped him. Who stopped him? Who stopped David? Yeah. Abigail. I'm impressed with. Now, she did the right thing. What did she do? She gathered all the food that David wanted. She gathered it and didn't tell her about it. She brought it before David and kneeled before him. And she ended up getting David to spare Nabal's life. So she pleaded mercy for Nabal. David was mightily impressed with Abigail, her wisdom, and ends up becoming his wife. Because what happens a little bit later, not too much later, but just a little later, what happens to Nabal? God killed him. Yeah. So he got his upcoming. Come up and you got to come up and David even said, see, I'm glad I didn't kill him because God took care of that situation. David didn't want blood on his hands. That's what Abigail told him. David, you don't want blood on your hands. So David spared Nabal. God killed him short time later. And then David married Abigail. Neat story. Don't be a Nabal. Be an Abigail. David and Palti's wife. Cindy? Michelle. I say David and And this faulty because why? Hold on, Dave.
It was given to, well, he's allowed to be married. So, I mean, I don't know how that ended up actually.
And we're not really told, other than David was married to Michal. Saul eventually gave Michal to David for the price of what? 100 foreskins. David ended up giving him 200. And that was Saul's way of, I'm going to kill David, but I'm going to let the Philistines do it first. That way it won't be blood on my hands. I'm going to make him a commander of the army, and hopefully he'll just die. And that was for David. That was for Saul's first daughter. And since David didn't die, well, he took that daughter back, and I'm not giving her to you. But if you want my second daughter, and I know you guys probably like each other, which they did, because I want 100 foreskins from the Philistines, thinking this will kill David. But it didn't. David came back with double. And so he thwarted Saul's attempt to kill him through via the Philistines. But after they got married and David's running from Saul, Saul gives Michal away to some other guy. And that's this faulty guy. And it stays with him for 10 years or so, while David's running and doing all this thing. He eventually gets her back, doesn't he? He eventually gets her back. For when Abner comes to David and says, David, you know, that the kingdom's divided, Ishbosheth and David are running their halves of the country. And Abner comes to David, the commander of Saul's or Ishbosheth's army, and says, David, I want to unite the kingdom. He had a fallout with Ishbosheth, but Ishbosheth accused him of sleeping with his concubine. So Abner left and says, we need to unite this kingdom, David. David said, great. Now that would have worked out well. Because Abner had power. They all followed Abner up in north. But that didn't work that way because something happened to Abner. When Joab found out about it, what did he do? When David's commander found out that Abner was there, what did Joab go straight away and do? He killed him. Why did Joab kill Abner? This would have been a great opportunity to unite the kingdom under David. Jealous? Yeah. Remember the three? Joab, Asahel, and Abishai? The three brothers? Abner killed one of them. Joab was the commander of David's army. But he was taking revenge on Abner. Even though Abner didn't want to do it, here it seemed like Abner was trying to do the right thing again. He got killed. Fell and broke his neck. Eli. That was one of those you had to know the story. I didn't say the high priest whose sons were blah blah. He fell and broke his neck. He fell and broke his neck when he heard what? Go ahead. Yes. And his sons had been killed. And his sons were, like Bill said, were taking the food. They were gorging themselves on his food. All the sacrifices that were coming in, they were illegally taking food, not according to the law.
Weren't they in a relationship with her too?
Yeah, that was either them or Samuel. I think it was Samuel's kids that were doing that.
Okay, I'll get those.
Yeah, but both sets of boys were not good.
They were having,
Yeah, that's what he just said.
yeah.
Yeah, apparently women would serve at the gates of the temple, and they were having relations with these women. Yeah, so they weren't good. They weren't good. But God's curse was that they would die, and that's what happened. And then Eli, because he was old and couldn't see, he was really fat. When he heard the news, he fell off his chair and he broke his neck. Kind of a sad ending for one of God's monsters, actually. But that was Eli. This is Hophni and Phinehas. Not good guys. Father of Saul. Kish. Father of Saul was Kish. Who was the father of David again? Jesse. Father of Samuel. What did you say? Okay, yeah. Now he had 2 wives. But he knows the name of his second wife, not Samuel's mom, but his second wife, that was jealous. Remember her name? Started with a P. Starts with a P. Penny Penina, something like that. I don't know how to spell it. But she had her and Hannah were both married to Elkanah. And Hannah was barren. And the other one was Eve. And Eli saw Hannah praying one day. What was she praying for? A child. So she was mouthing it, praying to God, and Eli thought she was drunk. Because he thought she was just saying nonsense. But she told him, I'm actually praying. I'm barren, oh God, you bless this son. He goes, okay. Then he sent her away, blessed her. And she ended up having Samuel. And because she was so excited and thankful, what did she do for Samuel? With Samuel? What did she decide she was going to do with the boy? She was going to give it to God. And that means that when he was weaned, she was going to send him to the temple. And he would live there. He would thrive under the tutelage of the high priest, who was, at the time, was Eli. And considering how evil Eli's sons were, and Eli kind of went along with it, it's really amazing that Samuel turned out as good as he did. Because he was raised by not so good role models. Yeah, he has Hannah. Any comments, questions about that? So that's Hannah and Peniel and Samuel. Nabal and David's wife, we talked about her already. Abigail. She was actually a really good woman. Pleaded for Nabal's life and was successful. And he told Saul the priest that the priest gave David the bread. So this guy was a snitch. Doeg. I say Doug. Say how you want. Doeg was not a good guy. And David even said that. He goes, when I was there, I saw this guy, this Hammond. He was an Ammonite, Doeg there, and he was kind of concerned about it. Rightly so, because when Saul was inquiring about the situation, Doeg was there and said, yes, the high priest, Ahimelech, helped David. And so then, because of that, Saul went up there, and he told his men, kill all these priests. And what did those men do? They all said, no, we're not going to kill the priests of God. So Saul ordered Doeg to do it. And Doeg had no problem doing it. Tells you his character. But Doeg slaughtered all the priests on Saul's command. Don't name your kids Doug. I had an uncle Doug. He was a jerk. I remember that. Who was the Philistine king of Gath? The priest who escaped Saul to serve David. We talked about him already. He was Ahimelech's son of Abiathar. Who was the son of Jonathan? Next page. Mephibosheth. What was wrong with Mephibosheth? He was lame. Yes, he was dropped as a child when the news of Saul's death and Jonathan's death, the handmaiden had picked him up and tried to carry him away, and she dropped him. And he was lame. And David eventually decided to care for him and let him eat at his table because of his promise he made to Jonathan, that he would care for Jonathan's seed. Who are the sons of Eli? Hophni and Phinehas. We already talked about that. Who was the servant of the house of Saul? Cindy?
Ziba.
Ziba. we're going to hear more about Ziba, but Ziba was kind of pulled into this situation with Mephibosheth. When David took Mephibosheth in, he told Mephibosheth, I'm going to give you all of Saul's land. And I'm going to have Ziba and his servants and his kids work the land for you. So Ziba kind of got voluntold on that. So that was Ziba. He was a servant of the household of Saul. Now he's servant of Mephibosheth. Who is the king of Amalek? He's the one that Saul was supposed to kill and did not kill. Agag. Mm-hmm. Who ended up killing Agag? Samuel did. When Samuel showed up, how did it go, Saul? Saul said, great, we did the commandment of the Lord. We defeated the Amalekites. And Samuel said, then why do I hear bleating of sheep? And what's the king doing here? Samuel got enraged, and that was one of the reasons that God took the kingdom away from Saul, because he disobeyed. And so Samuel took care of the king. It says he hacked him into pieces with his sword. He finished it. He did the commandment of God. So that's one of the reasons. What is another reason he took the kingdom away from Saul?
He was rebellious.
He was rebellious, yeah. There's two things that he did other than this. Yes. Before he defied God with the king, he sacrificed. He wasn't supposed to because he was impatient. That was the priest's job. So he did. And it was actually said at that point that God was going to take the kingdom away from him. And then God said it again when Agag. And then what happened again? He hired a medium. So there's three things specifically that he did that's why God took the kingdom away from him. Will?
But didn't God select Saul
He selected Saul.
to be the
Yes.
king of the Israelites
Yes.
for their rebellion?
And Saul would have been a good king had he followed the commandments of God, but he did not. So let's finish real quick. Buried Saul's and who buried Saul and his sons? They found them on the walls of Bethshan. Yes, the men of Jabesh Gilead that Saul rescued from Nahash, son of Saul and king of Israel. Ishbosheth, yes. He ruled in the north when David ruled in the south in Hebron. Who was swift-footed? Asahel, one of the three brothers. Joab, Asahel, and Abishai. Asahel was swift-footed, killed by Abner for pursuing him. David's commander. Joab. Who was Saul's commander? Abner. The ark was at this house for 3 months. Obed-Edom, that's right. So after Uzzah died, it stayed in Obed-Edom's house for 3 months. But God blessed Obed-Edom for that 3 months. So David realized he could now take the ark and go to Jerusalem. And he did it the proper way this time. Who killed Ishbosheth? Yes. Yes, Raka and Bana, however you want to say it. Some of his men. He said, this guy said he killed Saul. The young Amalekite. When he came to David, he thought he was going to bring David good news by saying, I'm the one that killed Saul. He really didn't. He found Saul dead. He took Saul's crown. He took Saul's bracelet. And he told David that he had killed Saul. In actuality, Saul fell on his own sword. But David didn't care. David wasn't even sure what happened. But you say you killed Saul, I'm going to kill you for doing that. Who was killed for touching the ark? We already did that one. Uzzah. And who was Samuel's mother? Hannah. How'd you all do?